in this video, I'm going to demonstrate a plot visualization so that you get a sense of what you're going to be doing in the exercise. As an example, I'm going to use Jury of Her Peers, which she read for the genre part of the unit. So when you're thinking this through, the idea here is to try to identify and think about how the structural elements of the plot work in relationship to each other. And that can often help you understand the meaning. And I don't know about you, but I'm a pretty visual learner. So just being able to map it out a little bit helps me in that way as well. So we want to think first of those main parts of the plot: the exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, conclusion. And then we can also think about if there are any of those ancillary parts of the plot, structural elements like flashbacks or subplots. So in this story, we do start in medias res, and if you recall, that means in the middle. So we begin with Mrs. Hale being picked up. That's really the exposition. So we start with this scene of Mrs. Hale being picked up at home, and Mr. Hale too, for that matter. He's the witness, and that's going to be our exposition. And it's giving us a sense of, something's going on. We've got the sheriff in the carriage, but that exposition kind of goes on for a bit, really until we get to the Hale's residence, and then we have that inciting incident of Hale giving his witness testimony. I'll do some little eyeballs here. So he's got to relate what he saw, and that kind of kicks off. We get that idea that someone's been killed, and that this is an investigation and that they're looking for evidence. And that search for evidence is the rising action. And notice that we actually have, there's sort of a split in that the men go off and look for evidence in other parts of the house and outside, but the story sticks with the women. That's the solid line here versus the dotted line. So we know that there's a trajectory, there's another thing happening with the men, but that kind of is off stage for us. And instead we have the women looking through the things in the house and having that conversation. Definitely right before they split up, we had that whole battle of the sexes moment. And then we have a really significant turning point where they find the bird, right? They find the bird cage and the dead bird. I don't know if I can draw a bird. That's kind of a bird. Okay. But at any rate, it's a dead bird. And they find the cage as well, and begin to put two and two together. So that's a really key turning point. We can debate about whether that's the climax or just a really significant turning point. The women definitely have some more conversation after that, and then the men. We have the men coming in. We have some other things happening, and then we have that moment where the women have to decide: are they going to turn over this evidence? They realize what's gone on, or are they going to conceal that? And are they going to, sort of save Minnie, essentially, or at least make it harder to convict her? So that is definitely, and I think, I'm going to identify that as a climax. Like I said, you can debate that a little bit. We've got a couple of really strong turning points here, but this one really seems to be that point of no return. And when they conceal that evidence from the men, that's really going to make it hard for them to make the case that they're trying to make. And then from there, there's really a very swift, sort of decline that gets us down to that resolution. And again, the resolution in this story, we don't know for sure what's gonna happen to Minnie, but we know for sure that they're hiding the evidence. So just mapping this out and plotting this, we get a sense of how this story functions, that it has this very lengthy rising action and a lot of things go on in there, and that it has these two really significant turning points. And so that's one thing that we can see as we start to visualize that. In terms of subplots, I mentioned in an earlier lecture that there may be just a faint subplot about Mrs. Hale and remembering Minnie and thinking about her as a girl. you know, almost like thinking through her relationship with her and regretting that she didn't, for example, visit more. It's not quite a fully formed subplot, but it is faintly there. And also in some regard, this thinking about Minnie when she was Minnie Foster could serve as a bit of a flashback. Again, just one that's related, not one where we actually kind of leave the action and go backwards in that way. So those are some of the plot elements. This would be an example. I mean, it's honestly really hard to draw on this, but this would be an example of a visualization. When you create your own, you can do something like this, where you're doing a whiteboard kind of thing and taking a screenshot, or you can just draw it on paper and take a picture. So either way, but again, really try to think through the structural elements, map out that structure, and then take a picture of what you've got. And you don't have to, you know, sort of write out all of the plot points on there. You can type out just like, you know, exposition equals, and then explain what part of the plot you're identifying as the exposition, that sort of thing. So you don't have to try to write as many words as I tried to on here. Obviously it didn't come out super well, but hopefully you get the idea.